Welcome back, everybody. This is a special edition of Twisted History, live from Turkey with none other than the Wonton Don. Hey, how are you?
Teşekkürler. That's the only word I know in Turkish. I think it means thank you.
Well, thank you, man, for joining me. We were just saying, you don't have a podcast, and that's officially yours, and I think we're always thrilled when you come on Twisted History. And for those of Twisted History listeners who are listening to this, they probably know you, obviously. A lot of stoolies know you. The Wonton Don YouTube page is very popular. You came on for the Twisted History of the New World. You put up videos, you travel. Do you call yourself like a YouTuber? You are like a travel buff, but you are like a true...
I call myself a foreign correspondent.
Yeah. That's a little tongue-in-cheek, though, right?
Yes, it's a little tongue-in-cheek. I guess I've sort of evolved into a YouTuber, but I used to not like that term, especially like my first 4 or 5 years on YouTube. I didn't have a lot of success, and I guess I wasn't following the tricks that you're supposed to do, do a top 10 video, like top 10 best places to go in Shanghai. I was doing sort of like Sacha Baron Cohen-esque troll shit in China, playing up the Massol who's never left Massachusetts aspect a bit. And I just thought that was like a funny dichotomy in China, because it's a place that people knew nothing about except from the news, when they're like, the Chinese are going to take all our jobs and stuff. And I was living there and being like, this is a really fun place. And the people are super friendly. It'd be like a crazy place to film. So that's kind of how I started. And a few of my vids, the ones that were shared by Barstool, did pretty well. But a lot of them really didn't take off. But then ever since I got hired by Barstool, I've obviously gotten a lot more eyes on it. And I've been able to expand out of China. And yeah, now my channel has become more into just like a travel show, but with my own twist on it.
Just to give people a little bit of context about how we know each other, this is a funny story. You came in on the Barstool Idol Season 1 crowd. Now, like you said, people knew who you were. Dave knew who you were. We had been posting videos to Barstool. You had been sending him YouTube links, right? And they'd been blogging them or just posting them?
Yeah, my first 2 YouTube vids I ever released were shared by Barstool.
Right.
So at that point, I was pumped, and I was like, dude, I might have a future. I might be able to pay the bills with YouTube.
And this is 2016?
No, this was back 2012, I think.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And so they posted the first 2 videos I had ever made and shared. And so I was like, oh, damn, I might blow up real fast, because I know for a lot of people it takes a while. But then the next 10 or 15 videos didn't get as much traction. And then a year later, maybe a year and a half, I put out the fake Federer video where I was pretending to be Roger Federer in China. That was shared by Barstool. And right after, I put out a Manny Pacquiao video. That was shared by Barstool. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to blow up. And I don't know, Dave claims he tried to hire me after that, but I don't know. He never got in contact with me. So so then I was like, now I'm going to blow up. And then eventually died down. I was like, nope, I guess not. And then I saw the Barstool Idol thing, and I was like, all right, this is a chance to actually get in front of them.
Right. And so, yeah. So I started in November 14th, 2016, which is a long time to be a Barstool employee. But that was November, and then I think January and February of 2017 was when we did Barstool Idol. And your name came up, and you came into the office. And
yes.
I remember you even sitting down with Dave. But it was kind of funny because you basically won. You basically won Season 1. You were
I won without having to do any of the competitions, which would have sucked. When I was watching the season, I was like, thank fuck I didn't
want to hold on to a greased up Glenny for as long as possible?
No, and they were just and one of the competitions do a pizza review, but it's all right, that's only testing a guy's ability to copy you, Dave. I
think Dave even said that. He was like, these are boring.
Yeah, he started to realize it, and it's a rough environment there. It's almost they're not trying to find the best contestant. They're just trying to create the most content out of the contest. But they were great. I got in front of them, and they were like, "Oh, you're that Donnie Does guy. You don't have to go and do the whole competition. We can hire you."
Yeah. I think Dave has always put you in a position where he's like, I just want Donnie to do what he does.
Yes.
I don't want it. And Dave is always hands off with a lot of creative people, what people want to do creatively.
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense with you because you have a direct vision of pretty much what you want to do.
Yeah, and when I was hired, I had already been putting out videos for 4 years. So
yes.
I had already proven myself. I didn't have to like do this competition just to prove I could make content.
So we didn't quite meet them, but I bring this up because I was pretty instrumental in helping Francis Ellis win season 1. So he was the actual winner of season 1.
Yes.
And then Francis Ellis and I were pretty much tied to the hip for the next 2 years. I was his producer. We did the sketch show. I think we even had you on the sketch show. We definitely knew each other at that point. We did some stuff together. We did a series in Flushing, Queens.
Oh yeah, you came with us on that.
Yes, the 3 of us.
That ended up being better than I expected because, well, just because Flushing, Queens, I had never been to, and I felt like I was back in China, 100%. Like I felt like it was going to be weird. We're going to be like trying to speak Chinese, but we're in America, and it was like, no, this is just legitimate China.
I watched them the other day, and they were really experimental too. We were like, you had a different shtick than even on your YouTube channel, and Francis, who was into acting and scripting a little bit. We didn't script it, but we definitely, you guys took a different angle for that one, and it was pretty experimental. And then it led to a whole trip of you two in China.
Yes.
Which was pretty experimental as well.
Pretty experimental. Francis, the only guy to come visit me in China. I had 2 friends from high school, but 2 friends from high school and Francis Ellis were the only friends, co-workers that ever made it to China.
Pretty funny. But so once again, I bring it up because that's pretty much how we met, and we had always kind of linked up and said like, oh yeah, we should do some more videos together. I don't really know. You often use freelancers when you're in China, obviously, and when you're abroad. So I don't know. We kind of went our separate ways for a little.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense just to fly you out to China every few weeks to help me make a video.
Well, that's what I mean. You're very self-sufficient too.
Yeah. They never told me like what my budget was for making vids. I was just so happy to finally have a job that I was like, fuck, I don't want to turn around and then ask like, hey, I need this much money to hire a camera guy out in China. So when I first got hired, I was just like me holding a GoPro, just going around China. Like I did this one trip to Japan. The whole thing was just me holding a GoPro. That's when I got to meet Manny Ramirez.
Japani Ramirez, the legend himself, man.
I remember that.
And that was awesome because that was spur of the moment. Someone was like, dude, Manny's playing in Japan. And I wrote a blog and I was like, I'm going to fly to Japan and go to one of Manny's games. And like when I'm at the airport about to hop in a flight, someone reaches out and he's like, dude, I play on the same team as Manny. He was a dude from the US. He was like, I follow Barstool Sports. Come through. I can probably put you two in touch. And so I went to the game, didn't have to watch from the stands. He let me like watch from the dugout with Manny Ramirez.
That's right. Wasn't this after Manny's, didn't he test positive for like what do they call it? A masking agent? He had taken like a feminine product.
Yeah, for sure. Because this was when he was like out of playing professional. He was playing in the Japanese minor leagues. Yeah, he wasn't even playing in the professional league, like in the top tier league. So this must have been like after kind of, he had his fall from grace. But when I met him, he was completely sober. He was like pretty religious, but he was still Manny.
Hey, take care, Brody.
Adios. Hey, send me your number just in case I go to China.
I'll give it to him. I'll give it to you. Then.
Like he had no idea how much he was worth. Apparently, someone who was on the team with him was like, "Man, my computer's not working. I think I need like a new computer. I got to get a." And then my buddy's like, "You should buy a MacBook." And he's like, "Dude, but MacBooks are like expensive." He's like, "Manny, you are worth like $50 million. You can afford. I'll go out and buy you a MacBook right now."
Unless he's not. Maybe he's not. Maybe
no. I'm pretty sure he is because he used to like not really. I remember they used to just find all of his paychecks like in his locker. Like he wasn't even cashing all of his checks.
That is a pretty rich guy move to do.
Yes, I know. Just leave like $1 million check in your fucking locker.
I'll get it later. So anyway, I bring this up once again because now we've reconnected. You hit me up and you were like, you know, all my guys are booked. If you want, I'm thinking. And you said to me, I'm thinking about India. But anyway, we couldn't really figure out the COVID rules. We couldn't figure out the Olympics. There was a rural Olympics. Yes.
Because I'm now banned from China, not because I got the boot, but because of COVID. They're not letting any tourists back in. And so I couldn't go to the Beijing Winter Olympics. And I was like, well, they got the Rural Olympics in India, which looked like insane. They had tractor races, bull races, like the most absurd sports. They play a sport there called kabaddi, which is kind of like professional tag. Most of the times I would travel just to film one of those sports. The fact you can get them all in the same place. So I was excited about that. Even if you look back from like 2014, I was mentioning, like, everyone's like, what do you want to do after China? And I was always like, Donnie does India. Because that's the only thing.
You could do 100 videos in India.
I could, which I think, like, if there comes a time when I'm like, say if I get a chick pregnant, my girlfriend probably, yes. But if there's a time when I'm like, oh, I won't be able to travel for like a while, I think I just like will plan to do like a month or two in India, and then I'll come back and I'll have like a year's worth of content.
Yeah, like you plant some roots for a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there, it's a lot like China. Well, it's crazier than China. From the people I've talked to who have been to both places, they're just like the amount of culture shock in India is so intense. But it's also convenient that so many people speak English. So you have like in China, I could like barely communicate with most of the people I'm talking to. But when you go to India, most of the country can speak some English. And yeah, so I told Sean that was my plan, and he was like, "I'll find a camera guy for you." He mentioned
Sean is our one of our head producers.
At first, he was like, "Steve Romano can go," and Steve was like, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And like he took me,
Athlete Steve from Coach Prime.
Yes,
if
yes,
knows.
Athlete Steve, and like he took me into a room, and he's like, "Man, I would like love to film a travel series for you, but could we just go anywhere but India?" And I was just like, okay. I mean, like the last thing I wanted was a camera guy who was there with me, but like didn't want to be in India. Because then if you're like, if you don't have a positive attitude there, that's going to make the experience like 100 times worse.
Yeah.
But I remember he had to like eventually mentioned your name too. I was like, but what about John Kelly? Like, is he free? And you were pumped, and I was excited about that. But then we learned, even like weeks before, I had already booked my ticket. I think I checked.
Yeah, we both did. You're right.
Yeah, they had like changed some of the COVID rules where we were going to have to quarantine for a week, which wouldn't have made sense if we were trying to film a series.
That would have sucked.
Imagine, quarantining for a week in India.
We did consider it though. I actually did consider it for a
yeah.
minute, and I was like, should I say to Donnie, let's do it? Like, let's quarantine for a week and then do it. But
and then they lifted the quarantine rules, but they canceled the World Olympics. Everything was just up in the air there. People were like, yeah, I think it will happen, but we're not sure. Like, if COVID gets worse, they might have to cancel it. So we pivoted.
So we originally booked flights into India and out of, and we easily changed them once you said Istanbul. You're like, I'm thinking about Istanbul too. What?
Turkey, yeah. I had actually been to the city once before when I was flying to China on Turkish Airlines. I had a layover, and it was maybe a 16-hour layover. So I took it, and Turkish Airlines is like, oh, for people with long layovers, we'll pay for you to tour the city for free. We'll pay for the entrance fee into like the Hagia Sophia, the Blue Mosque. We'll take you to a few other spots. And then I still had like 4 hours to kill. And they're like, yeah, just wander around the city and go back to the airport. And so I had one day to walk around the city, and the weather was perfect. And I was like, I got to come back here at some point.
Yeah, and then we did. We just completed. Right now we're in Turkey. We're in Cappadocia.
As you can tell by the cushions.
Did I say that right? Cappadocia.
Cappadocia. There's a Cappadocia, Cappadocia.
I've heard both.
Cappadocia. No, that's not one, but yes.
And then we just did a balloon ride. It's a touristy town here, but it's honestly got a great feel. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like a touristy town.
We're also here in the middle of the winter, sort of, so we're not surrounded by Instagram influencers. I'm kind of the one Instagram influencer around.
But we started in Istanbul. We're in Cappadocia now. So we did a few days in Istanbul. We're going to do a few days in Istanbul on the back end of this trip. We did the Grand Bazaar. We saw some of the sites. We took a ferry over to the Asian side. You correctly pointed out that was my first time in Asia, which I didn't even realize.
Yeah, you just hop on like a 20-minute ferry. It could be even less, and you're in Asia. And the Asian side has like a little bit of a different feel to it. I hear it's like a little more laid back. Like you can walk around on the Asian side drinking a beer. On the European side, they kind of enforce an open container law a little bit more.
So we booked those flights. We were all set on Turkey, and then you kind of, I don't remember. It might have been before because we did a couple Zooms afterwards. But then you were like, you don't really have to do this. But I didn't even know you could go to this place. But I think I'm gonna go to Iraq.
Yeah. Tommy, our sort of PA on this trip, he traveled with me on my last Barstool Abroad trip. He was actually the one who planted the seed.
Really?
And so I did know that you could go to Kurdistan, which is it's an area of Iraq,
Northern
that
Iraq.
almost kind of acts like its own country.
Yep.
And I've heard like there these days it's pretty safe. The people are super friendly. And then when I just started to Google Iraq, all of these YouTube videos were popping up of people actually in Baghdad and like in the marshes south of Baghdad. And one of the YouTubers, I just looked to see if he had an IG. I found him and I saw that he had actually reached out to me like a month prior, sending me some tips for the Balkans or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, he'll probably respond. Like I'm on his radar. So I was like, hey, I saw you did like a trip to Baghdad. Like, how was that? And he said he had absolutely amazing experience. He said he didn't feel in danger at all. And I'm not saying Iraq is all hunky-dory now, but the fact that they're like actually trying to promote their tourism industry, like
It's a big change.
Yeah, and like the Iraqi people in Baghdad, they get really happy when they see a foreign tourist come, because they're like, we're trying to show people, because obviously you ask anyone in the U.S. about Baghdad and like not the most positive images are going to come to their mind.
Yeah, and that's probably obviously because of our history there, especially America
Yeah.
and the UK. But
And
2003 invasion of Baghdad and all of that.
But the fact that like some people have been able to go back to just living a normal life, that's a positive sign. And I think when people see the videos, they're not going to be like, oh my God, I have to go to Baghdad. But at least they're going to be like, oh, you know what? Like there actually are just like normal people there who are just living their lives. And so you hear like all you hear about is war, and it's like, well, yeah, but there's also just thousands of people millions of people that just are going about their daily lives and, enjoy peace and a good time just as much as us.
Yeah, so I feel like we glossed over it, so I want to back up, but we were just hitting on some key themes, and that's really why I wanted to have you on, which is where is your line? Do you have a line? Because I realized when you asked me, and I was like, I would love to go to Iraq, and then I had to kind of ask myself, like, well, wait a minute. If I told my wife, if I told my parents, if I told people,
Your boss,
if I told anyone, they'd be like, they would look at me with a face and be like, you want to go where?
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of look at myself and be like, why do I want to do this? And I did kind of realize, like, I've always had a soft spot for hard news journalism. Not that that's what we're doing, but I meant like I've always thought that maybe was going to lead me into like, not like you said, like war conflict journalism. I don't really want to go to Ukraine right now, but for whatever reason, I really jumped at it. And that's my question for you is like, do you have a line? And do you have like a line?
I would say I do have a line, because I've had a lot of people ask me, are you going to Ukraine and stuff? And just the people in my life right now, like, if I went to Ukraine, like both my parents and my girlfriend would be very upset with me, because no matter how much research you do, like you're in an active war zone, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and we've been reading about hard news journalists dying.
Like I don't have a death wish. I'm not trying to do like war journalism on the front lines of the fight against ISIS. Like maybe at some point in the future, if my like career takes a different path, but I do know, like, I'm working for Barstool Sports. My videos are, at the end of the day, supposed to be sort of lighthearted. One of the reasons I was willing to pull the trigger on this trip is because we have a guide. Like, we have a local Baghdadi guide who's pretty much going to be with us most of the time, almost all the time. And it's the same guide that the other YouTuber I talked to has been with. And so I kind of feel like, I kind of know when to turn it on and turn it off. Like when I'm in a place where I'm like, I can go nuts and like, I'm not going to get in that much trouble. Like I can sort of push the line. I can joke about whatever the hell I want, and it's not going to cause a serious problem. I'll do that. But when I'm around people where I'm like, I got to play it safe, just be a little more buttoned up and like, not as kind of like...
Not cranking hoons and like...
Yeah, I'm in Iraq, I'll be cranking a bunch of hoons. But I'll probably like, you can't walk on the street holding a beer in Iraq. Apparently they have a couple bars, which we're going to check out. But like, alcohol is at least on paper, it is taboo.
I actually said this to you on the Zoom. I was like, I know you lived in China for 8 years. China is not a place where you can, well, China.
It actually, the first 4 years in China, it was a place you could do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, but I guess what I meant is China has a similar reputation back home, where it
Yes.
would be like if I said I was living in China, people would be like, be careful.
Yeah, no, I mean, my first couple years in China, I arrived there having the same impression. I was like, I got to be very careful here. After being there 6 months, we were smoking joints in cabs. I was like, there's like there's a lot of rules, but they kind of just let all the foreigners do their own thing.
You think it's that?
For a while,
It's harder to be an actual Chinese?
Yes, it's hard to be an actual like the foreigners are like they're gonna abide by their own rules and stuff, and so like even having a VPN there just to like reach all the websites back in the U.S., they don't enforce that for foreigners. But I think like a lot of Chinese people don't have one because they're afraid that the government they'll actually get punished for having one of those.
Right, and in a lot of ways that fuels the reputation back home. It's almost like it is true. You know, people are like, see, that's why you got to be careful. So I do think it's different though in the Middle East, where like we've all been influenced by the war and just the war-torn region itself.
I know. It's been like, because even before the war, Iraq was under control of, or it was controlled by Saddam Hussein, which was probably it wasn't a great place to live then either.
Yeah.
So just
definitely not if
the people there have had it fucking rough.
Yeah, especially actually because you mentioned northern Iraq, and that's the Kurds. Saddam Hussein was accused of Kurd genocide.
Yes. Yep. He did, and that's why the Kurds were the U.S.'s biggest ally. And I know U.S. recently withdrew all their troops from Kurdistan. A lot of people were pissed off because they're like, now we're just leaving them there to be attacked from all sides. But the Turks have always done a good job. I meant the Kurds have always done a good job of standing up for themselves. And yeah, I do feel it's kind of like, I've heard that it's night and day when you're in Kurdistan as opposed to the rest of Iraq. Like it feels very normal. Like if we were in Kurdistan, it wouldn't feel much different than us being in Turkey now.
Right. But we're not doing that. We're going to fly.
No, but we're going because I was like, you know what? If I'm going to Iraq, we might as well go all the way.
Because they changed the visa policy, we can actually fly into Baghdad and get it right there.
Yes, we can just show up with arrival. I think we might need a COVID test. But yeah, I mean, he's not allowed to bring his large camera. You would have to apply for like a journalism permit. And the last thing we want is to be considered journalists there.
Yeah, the word journalism, the word media, I don't think we're going to utter there.
No, not at all. And one of the other things why I pulled the trigger on this is because, I was like, well, what would we even do there? And then I saw that you can drive to the marshes of Mesopotamia, like 5 hours south, the cradle of civilization. Like this is where the first cities on Earth, like, existed. So we learned that if we go 5 hours south, they have this whole population of people. They're called the Marsh Arabs. I don't know if that's what they call themselves, but that's what I think a lot of people there call them. And they're Arabs that have been living in these marshes for thousands of years. And Saddam Hussein hated them because they tried to do their own thing. They weren't like listening to him. So he drained the marshes at one point. And recently they have refilled all the marshes and they've all returned. The population of them is starting to go up. And they've kind of been living the same way of life for just thousands of years. And our tour guide has a connection there. So we're going to go and we're going to spend a night in a reed hut with the Marsh Arabs. And like we can swim in the marsh. So I was like, I want to go hippo mode in Mesopotamia. Like that's like part of the reason we're going to Iraq. Now traveling to Iraq, it's not as cheap as you'd think just because there's not as much tourism and not as many people want to go. So the people that do go, it's such like a rare thing. You got to pay to play. So we're just going to be there for 4 days. It's definitely more expensive than traveling around Turkey, but I think it's going to be worth it. And the one thing I realized, like my biggest video by far was the Mole People video I did, which was also
with Vibs in Las Vegas, right?
Yes, with Vibs in Las Vegas, and it's by far.
I actually looked at that was like 7 or 20. It's up to like 20 million.
Yeah,
or
it's up to like 20 million or something.
It's wild.
And that was my most serious video by far too. So, because I understood like in Baghdad, I might not be able to be like as free as I would be normally to be just joking around constantly. But I'm like, if I have to be serious at times, that's fine. Like people have enjoyed some of the more serious stuff I've done.
Yeah, when it's like, that's where it's like, I think I come in. If we can get the visuals, some of the visuals could be so unique, you know.
Yes.
And you're right, we're not going to be shooting with a camera, but we're going to have some GoPros. And I think we'll be skilled enough to be able to show like some of the country to a Barstool audience that's probably going to find it pretty fascinating.
Yeah, just like...
If you're a fan of this show, if you're a fan of Twisted History, I think you'd be pretty interested in this.
Yeah. Like I would say the goal when we're down there, it's not like we're going to see like Baghdad 20 years after the war, like what are the scars the war has left on the country. We're kind of just going down to see like what is everyday life like in Baghdad now, like in the city and in the marshes.
Yeah.
The marshes of Mesopotamia.
And it is still a fluid situation. I mean, aside from ISIS, Iran the other day shot missiles into, I don't think we were going to Repel, right? Did I say that right?
Erbil, which is actually in Kurdistan, which everyone was telling me was the safe part. Now Iran is...
Well, it's north of Baghdad, and it was I think it was a consulate. I think it was not the embassy, which actually is the largest. The embassy's in Baghdad. That's the largest. You said it was the largest U.S. embassy in the world.
It is, yeah.
I don't know if it's open. I think it has. I think the State Department is way behind because they said it was closed, but I'm pretty sure I went to the Baghdad embassy Twitter and they were like open for business. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So that's what's interesting.
Should we show up? I bet they have a solid
I would
bar
love
in
to
there.
see
I bet
it.
they have a nice pool.
I would love to take a picture of it, like the largest U.S. embassy in the world.
Probably like a 5-star hotel. I'm not
No, I
not
think it's a
joking.
compound. I think it's like
It's a compound that probably has like a swimming pool, bar, a tennis court.
You think?
I don't know. I could see that.
I mean, I guess I even mean from the
Because it's
outside.
probably like a tough sell to like send someone from the State Department to Iraq, but they're like, but have you heard the Iraq embassy? We've got a fucking swimming pool,
It's
a squash court.
It's the largest in the world.
Yeah.
Actually,
I mean, you're going to get the occasional rocket, but
I was looking at stuff I was searching the Times, and I did find there is a chief, right? What do they call it? I can't remember. Like the head of the Baghdad embassy. I think they call it the station chief or something like that. Maybe we'll hit her up. It's a woman, I believe.
yes.
Maybe we'll hit her up and just tell her we're in country.
It's kind of worrisome being from the U.S. where, I mean, there are some people like where the U.S. war completely fucked over their life. And
Yes.
it's like, do we say we're Canadian? But
I was actually going to ask you that. I was like, do we have a cover story? Are we going to be like Swedish nationals or something that don't
I
know
mean, we
Swede?
could pass as Canadian, but the thing is, if we're talking to police, you got to tell them they're American because they're going to want to see your
the
passport.
Yeah.
But when we're just talking to locals, like, yeah, we could say we're Canadian. I mean, does that even help?
I don't know.
Was
but
Canada involved in the Iraq war?
to be honest, I think they're an ally of ours, but I don't think they sent many troops. I know Australia did, and I know the UK obviously did.
Okay,
So they're kind of in
I don't
the same
think we
boat.
could pass as Sweden, but
I was
mean,
wondering if you thought of that though, if we needed like a cover.
yeah, I was always wondering. But I mean, so the people I've talked to who have been to Iraq, they said there's not like a negative reaction when they say, "Oh, we're from the
American.
U.S." Like, I mean, a lot of like the people we meet, they're just so happy that tourists are coming to their country because obviously it helps the economy. And it like, they're very proud. Like, I've already been talking to some local Iraqis that are like, we would love to show you around. They're just like, you know, they want to show people that they're normal people too. And back to what you were saying, do I draw a line? Like, I was always thinking of going to North Korea at one point. Because
Well, you did the DMZ.
I went to the DMZ, but that's technically in South Korea. There's one area where you could say you're in North Korea, but I didn't really go. But I knew some people in China who would go and run the Pyongyang half marathon. I also knew someone who went and DJ'd at like a club in North Korea. Like, I knew a couple people who went.
What?
And yeah, that's a crazy
That
story.
seems so rare.
Yeah, you could have him on the podcast.
I was just
could-
gonna say
could
that's
reach
a
out to him.
story that I feel like if you Googled, nothing would come up.
Yeah, there's one story because I read about it in this Shanghai magazine, and then I ended up becoming friends with the guy.
Really?
But then, so I was thinking, I was like, dude, that'd be a crazy thing to do. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to film how I normally film. I would have to just take like little clips, like cell phone clips. But I was thinking of doing it, and then the Otto Warmbier thing happened, where
Of course.
Yeah,
I was
this-
just going to mention it.
Yeah, this like American college kid. And my theory is like his fraternity back in Virginia was like, bring us back a cool souvenir from North Korea.
So for people that don't know, Otto went with, I think, a student group, right? Like friends of his.
I don't know if he was traveling with friends. He was traveling, and then he just like when
But it was a bigger tour group.
Yes, when you're in China, you can sign up on a tour. And I'm sure he was with a bunch of other tourists like from Europe and the U.S.
Right. And so he was accused, and they actually had it on video, right, of him taking a poster down from the wall.
Yes, he took like not a huge poster. It's probably like the size of that thing, but yeah, off the wall of his hotel and put it in his bag and got stopped at the airport.
Midnight Express style.
Yeah, and like my theory was just like his fraternity was like, bring us back a cool souvenir from North Korea.
And
it's
at
his
first,
last day in the country, and he was like, oh, dude, if I brought back this sign, because it was some like propaganda poster.
That's right.
And he was like,
exactly
oh,
the
if I
word.
bring back this propaganda poster, like it'll be fucking nuts. And like that's something when I was his age, like who knows, like I could have done something like that. I think I'm mature enough to know that's probably not the move to make in North Korea now.
Yeah. I also get what he was thinking now. He was probably like, nobody cares about this fucking poster, right? There's probably 100 of these.
Yeah, and probably didn't realize there was cameras. I mean, you should like always assume you're being filmed in North Korea, but then North Korea started to accuse him of like being in the CIA, and they held him captive for like a long time. And the next time they like brought him out, he was in a coma almost.
It was like he had been like experimented on or something. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have any proof of that.
And
but
like they think he got botulism, which I'm not even sure how you get it, but like some people think he may have been tortured, and they finally returned
he had
him.
like teeth issues. His parents, because they like, to fast forward, like they eventually like medevaced him out. Wasn't the president? I don't know who it was at the time. I'm forgetting who was just instrumental.
But who helped?
Yeah, somebody was instrumental in finally medevacing his body back, which was in he was in a coma.
Yeah,
and they didn't like know.
No, they were just like, hey, we're gonna return your kid, and everyone like the parents were probably like
they were like finally
pumped, and then they're like, yeah,
he's in a quite
asterisk,
state.
he's in a coma, and then he was alive for a bit.
Yeah, and I think he had like teeth like pulled out and all this shit.
Yeah, so that was so fun. So after that, like, I knew if I went to North Korea, like my parents and like everyone who cares about me, as I talked about before, would be furious with me, and I was just fucking pissed at North Korea. Like, I'm not trying to like shine a light. I'm not trying to give North Korea any more fucking promo after that bullshit. Like,
sure,
yeah. Like when things like that happen, I'll draw a line too.
Oh, so I didn't realize that, because I actually was thinking in my head, I was like, what is similar to Baghdad or Iraq that you've done in the past? And I remember the DMZ video, and I was, because you did kind of push the limit there in a way where you were like fucking with that guy.
Well, yeah,
that one, which was very funny, because he was kind of like the British guard that didn't move at all, right?
Yes, and I did like who are Saturdays for? Who are Saturdays for? Like, yeah. To the guy, but so that was a North Korean guard, like on the. So I wasn't like being like, "Who are Saturdays for?" To a, no.
Oh, you mean the South Korean?
That was a South Korean guard.
I
yes.
see. Oh, see, I didn't realize that. Okay.
So my girlfriend didn't realize that either, and thought I had gone to North Korea, and she was fucking pissed.
Yeah. Okay, so that's fascinating.
She actually blocked my number for a few days. Well, that's like I also knew when we might be going to Iraq. I was like, hey, we're gonna do this the last 4 days of the trip. If you want to just head back to the U.S., then that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, you were very gracious.
Because I definitely can't. I mean, I'm not even allowed to, like, at the company to like ask you to go to Iraq. But I was like, we're doing this. If you
John,
want
we
to
have
come.
videos to film. What the fuck?
Yeah, I'm not gonna be like, what the fuck, John? You said you were down for this trip. So yeah, I wasn't like, and I'm still not forcing you. If you end up wanting to back out, because like, yeah, it was just. But I was definitely excited when you're like, yeah, I'm down to do it.
But I guess what I mean is, so you do consider, even though you don't have kids, it's more of like a respect thing to your loved ones.
Yes, but like I'll still go to Baghdad for sure. Like maybe if I had kids, I would be a little more weary about it. Like that's definitely a huge thing. And hey, if I had like, yeah, it all comes down to just like weighing the risks. Like the Baghdad trip is going to be one of the safer trips I've probably been on, because most of the time I'm not using a guide. I'm just like winging it and seeing what happens.
That's true.
And this time we're going to be kind of with a guide, and we're going to just be like very aware the whole time, where we're not just going to be all filming willy-nilly and shit. So
yeah, I think the first thing that comes up for a lot of people, well, I don't know if it's the first thing, but is the checkpoints, and it's like that's like world famous in a way. It's like they had these military checkpoints along roads where I think that has changed, right? Like now we can probably count based on the YouTube videos we watched recently that it's going to be Iraqi security force and not some there are like random militia groups aside from ISIS even, but I don't think we're going to hopefully encounter them.
Yeah, I heard that when Doug went with the guy that we're going with, he kind of like seemed pretty well connected. So sometimes you got to just wait in line. Like you'll drive for 50 miles, then have to wait at this security checkpoint for a while they check all your papers, then drive for 50 miles, do it all over again. And he was like, when I was traveling with this guy, we kind of just breezed through him. So that should help. And yeah, like like my biggest concern is just like one of the police officers getting upset that we're filming and like taking our camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Sure.
That's probably more of a concern than being kidnapped, which if we had gone to Iraq 2 years ago, that would have been my number one concern. And I probably, and I wouldn't have gone because that was when like it was in the news where that happened to a few people who were like in Turkey and then went to Syria to cover the war and they were kidnapped.
Did we consider that? Did we, before flying into Baghdad, did we consider going through the Syrian border? Or no, not the Syrian border.
We wouldn't have to go through the Syrian border because
I meant southern Turkey and Iraq.
We were considering just going from Turkey to Kurdistan and then maybe Kurdistan to Baghdad. You actually have to get 2 separate visas. If you first go to Kurdistan, you then have to get a new visa when you go to Baghdad. But if you go to Baghdad, then your visa works wherever you go.
Just to pivot, because I think we've done a nice job covering the
Yes.
trip. Are you also addicted? Do you have the desire to see like every nook and cranny on this planet? If
I don't know. There's
willing.
a couple people that are on like a mission to go to like every country in the world, and everyone always asks me, they're like, "How many countries have you been to?" And I don't have a number in my head. Like I don't have a map on my wall at home that like every country is colored in. So no, I don't think I need to go to every nook and cranny, but I think like every interesting story I hear, I want to cover. It's not like I don't think I'm going to run out of ideas for doing this. And it's weird. Like, I think in the future, it'd be great to just focus on like one thing. Like now we're doing a whole trip. We're going to put out probably 8 to 10 videos and we're doing a whole travel series. Like if there's something big in the future, like it could be fun just to focus like all your attention on that, travel, film that for 5 days and put out like a top notch 20 to 40 minute documentary like on that topic. That would be a lot of fun.
So that's next week. We'll probably record another one of these to get I think it would be interesting to get our 24 hours out thoughts, because I think there's like the whole planning thing, but right now we're totally in the Turkey mode. We are very much not thinking about Iraq, and one of the reasons we're doing this trip, which you were extremely excited about, was camel, not fighting, right?
Wrestling.
Camel wrestling.
Camel wrestling. I love weird sports, and that seemed perfect. Like one of the weirdest trips I had done in the past was to Tajikistan to cover Buzkashi, headless goat polo. If you haven't seen that YouTube video, check it out. So when the India trip looked like it wasn't going to happen, I was just looking for like one crazy event that we could kind of like base the trip around. And I was reading that Turkey has a camel wrestling season. The biggest event was in January. I learned out about this. I learned that the sport even existed at the end of January, but I saw that the season lasts until March. So I was like, well, if we can go and just get a solid video on camel wrestling, then the rest of the trip can just be a tour of like all of the hot spots in Turkey and showing people what the entire country's like. So we found a Turkey wrestling match on March 20th or March 19th that we're going to be going to. I'm looking forward to it because that's like right up my alley. Just weird shit like that no one in the U.S. has ever heard of. Yeah, whoa, that's weird. That's kind of, those are the first videos I started making for Barstool, and we're bringing it back on this trip. And I will say the locals so far have been some of the friendliest people I've met in all of my travels.
Yeah, you're right. We ran
Yeah.
into some people that, because sometimes, and it's honestly not a big deal, as long as the vibes are okay. Like sometimes you wind up paying people for their time, right, and for their information, and
Yeah.
it is helpful, and it is like fueling the tourism industry. You're like, hey,
Yeah.
look, I'm here for this reason, but the people here have been over accommodating. They make us. I mean, I love one thing. My favorite thing about Turkey so far is how, because I'm a big coffee lover.
Oh,
is
yeah.
they love coffee.
Oh, yeah.
They love tea. They don't do anything without offering you a coffee and a tea.
Yes.
And that is like great vibes.
Yeah. No, it's also a nice way to ease into Iraq because Turkey's like, I mean, it's the city of Istanbul is literally half European, half Middle Eastern, Asian. But that's kind of like what the country's like on a whole, too. There's a lot of aspects that remind you of Europe, but then there's a lot of very Middle Eastern aspects. Like they have a huge drinking culture here that you won't see anywhere else in the Middle East. Because it's like, it's probably the most secular Muslim country, I'd say.
So if you listen to Twisted History, the previous episode before I left, Large let off the episode and he was like, John's going to Turkey and he's going to meet Wonton Don and it's the middle of World War III. And it was funny, that's why I kind of brought up all the stuff because like we talked about it, a lot of people have that perception of this area, right? Especially right now because of what's happening.
I mean, you saw the person on, I don't forget who it was, but she was like, I'm going to have to cancel my vacation to Italy because of this. Did you see that clip that went super viral and everyone's like, you fucking bitch, like you fucking boomer. Like, I've never seen people get like more upset. They're like, there's a fucking war in Ukraine. You're worried about your vacation to Italy. Some people have asked me, they're like, are you like scared traveling around Europe with this going on? And I think we're good for at least the next week. And hey, if things get rough in Europe, we'll just go to Iraq.